Back again YouTube, and welcome back to the coding workshop. And we're just going to pick up where we left off last night by finish our session component. But before we do that, I actually just want to quickly run you back through on what we've already completed. And you can see I've not changed anything. This is pretty much where we left off last night. So first of all, we went ahead and we create our session interface, which contains 7 methods. Which you can see on your screen right here. So we've got the set array, get, delete, invalidate, flush, and the as method. And we then create our session class, which implements that session interface. And we went ahead and implement all of those methods. And we also got a constructor which we are bringing in our session storage interface, and we've piped that to a property called storage. And you can see that's pretty much how we are interacting with our storage interface or session storage, or we'll come to implement that in today's video. You can see we're using our property to get the method from our storage interface, which is located within that storage directory. And these are the method that we've implemented, and I think there's 11 method in here, and you can see that the name closely matches what we've got in our session class, and that is not by accident, that is on purpose, for no particular reason, just to keep it sort of like flowy. So yeah, so these are all the methods that we got in our storage interface or our session storage interface, and these are what we're going to be implementing tonight or in today's video. So what I'm going to do is, in this directory, I'm going to create a couple of files. So the first one I'm going to create is going to call native session storage, and this is basically referring to PHP default storage, because we're not actually implementing no other like implementation of storage. We're simply going to use PHP, what PHP gives us, and we're going to use it as default. But as I've said, we've set this up so we can actually drop things in and out, because we're designing by interface, and we're using our factories to create objects and pass in different session storage and handlers. So in the future we will be able to take this out, put something else in without sort of like affecting the functionality of the code within the application. So I'm going to create a native session storage. And the second file I'm going to create is, it's going to call abstract session storage. And the idea behind this is I'm going to actually implement the interface from this abstract class, and then inherit that class into my native storage, in my native session storage. And the reason why I'm doing that is I actually want to move all the more complex logic to that abstract class and not have it implemented within my native storage, because I want to keep that nice and clean and not diluted with too much session logics. That's my idea behind it. And because I'm using an abstract class, I don't have to implement all of those methods within that interface. I can pretty much split them over both classes, which is what I'm going to show you right now actually. So we're going to go ahead and start coding out this native session storage class, and say PHP declare strict type. Again, strict type because we're type inting. Say namespace, and it's going to be magma the session, and we're in that storage directory. And say class, call it native session storage, and this is going to extend that abstract session storage class, which we have not created yet. We've created a file, but we've not defined it, so we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to say PHP declare strict types namespace be magma session storage, and it's going to be an abstract class. So we'll start with the abstract keyword first, and it's going to be abstract class, and we're going to prefix it with abstract because that's also one of the PHP coding standard. If you're going to have abstract class, it's always good to prefix that class or your class name with the abstract prefix, and this is going to be no exception. So it's going to be abstract session storage, I believe, yep. And that is going to actually implement that session storage interface. And this is going to have a property, and it's going to be called options. So it's going to be a protected array. So I'm going to call options. I'm going to initialize it with an empty array, you know, with the square brackets denote an empty array. And this class also got a constructor method. So I'm going to need public function construct, and this is going to take one argument, which is options, which is optional. Then I'm going to pipe it to that property. Right, that's as much as we're going to do for this abstract class right now, because we're going to be working in both of them at the same time. I know that's sort of like going against what I've initially said, by, you know, I didn't want to actually jump from one class to the other, but because these are so closely related, we're going to go into both in and out so you can see how they're interacting. So if I go back to my native sessions, and this also is going to contain a constructor. So I'm going to say public function construct, and it's going to take one argument, which is going to be very similar to our abstract class. I'm going to say options, and again we're going to initialize it with an empty array. Then I want to pass that option to my abstract class, so we're going to do that through the parent construct. So I'm going to say parent colon construct. I'm going to pass that options in, and that way when we come to create our factory, we can actually pass in the argument within our factory, which is going to get filtered down to this class, which then filters into the abstract class. When we come to do our factory, you will see exactly how that ties in. So let's quickly sort of like have a look at the session storage interface and see what we want to create. As I'm saying, because we're extending the abstract class, we don't then have to implement all the method within this class or the abstract class. We can basically split it, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take these methods, because these are the actual session implementation, and I'm going to take these and actually I'm going to copy them. It's a bit cheating, but I'm going to bring it to my native session, and I want to implement these methods within this class. So I'm just going to give them a body one by one. So I'm going to start off with SetSession, and it's going to be session key, and that's going to equal the value. So the key that we set, we're going to actually equal it to the value that we set that key at, right? So that's the first one. And again, you can see how simple these methods are. I mean, we could have done this in a much simpler way, but we're sort of like going on with how we're doing it, because as I said at the very beginning, we're trying to build something that's got an actual structure, because that's important. Building something with structure means that it's going to be readable, it's going to be maintainable, and it's going to be extendable. So we're going to set array session, and that is going to be session again. I'm going to set the key. Why have I got capital? Oh. Yep, sorry. So it's going to be the key, and it's going to be an empty array, and that's going to be the value. Right, very simple method that we're dealing with, or we're setting right here. And the GetSession is simply going to return session key. Again, very, very simple. But we're going to come back to this method in a bit, because we need to actually check that we got a session key before we return anything. So once we implement the as session method, we're going to wrap that in this method and check that we've got a key before we do any sort of return. So delete is going to be onset session, and again I'm going to pass that key in, and got invalidate. And this method, actually there's a couple of different parts to it, and I'm going to walk you through it as I'm going along. So the first bit is going to be session. We're going to get PHP super global session, and we're going to say array, an empty array. And what we're doing right here is actually just resetting that session, resetting it. The next bit of this code we're going to say if any set, and say session that use cookies. So what this bit is doing, we're saying we're going into PHP config. We're saying that if session is set, and it's using that cookie that we've got where our session ID is stored. We're checking if that is there, and if it is, we want to get all the parameters for that cookie. So I'm going to say params. I'm going to say session get cookie params, and we're getting cookie params, but I'm going to show you in our abstract class how we're actually defining or how we're actually setting those parameters, because we're going to do it so our application can actually configure these settings, and we don't necessarily have to go into the PHP config file to do it. We can actually do it within our application according to how we are going to implement it. So you're going to see that when we come to start writing our abstract class. So we're getting our cookie params, and then we want to expire that cookie. We're going to expire it, so we're going to set a date in the past. So we're going to say SetCookie, and we're going to use a method that we've not yet created, but we know that it's in our interface, which is the get session name. We need to get that session name. I'm going to say this get session name, and you also notice that I've used the this keyword, but this method will not be implemented within this class. It's going to be implemented within that abstract class, but because we've extended that abstract class, we can use this keyword to actually get the method which is in that abstract session storage class. I know it's basically inheriting, and I know we're talking about keeping our code as loosely coupled as possible, but it's because this is one component. I think it's okay if we're inheriting, because it's one component together and it relies on different parts to actually function. So if it was sort of like coupled to a different component, then yeah, I might have an issue with that. But it's one component, and I'm doing coupling within that one component by using the extend or the inheriting classes within my class, which is dependent on who you speak with. Some people might frown upon it, saying it's coupling your framework and it's not very decoupled. But anyways, you can't always get away from inheritance, because when we come to writing our base controller class, we're going to be using inheritance. You just cannot get away from it when you're coming to write. When you're doing an MVC framework, it's just how it is, unfortunately. Well, it's not unfortunate, but that's just how it is. So SetCookie, we're going to say get session name, and if you over this SetCookie method, you can see actually the parameters that it requires. If it's going to show me, it's not showing me for some reason. I did turn off all my extensions, so it's not helping me out tonight, but not to worry, let's crack on. So we'll get the session name, and I believe the second argument is the value, which we're going to set to an empty string. And the third argument, I believe, is the expiry date, which I said we're going to set for a date in the past. And we're going to say params, and it's going to be lifetime. Next one is going to be the path. Next one is going to be the domain. Params. We define this as secure params HTTP only. And again, I said this session get cookie params. You're probably wondering where we're getting these values from, but I'm going to show you in the abstract class how we're actually setting these values using the session SetCookie params, which is going to be defined within our abstract class. And you're going to see that in a minute. Right, so we're checking if we've got our session and we're using cookies. We're getting that cookie params, and we're sort of like setting the SetCookie method to an expiry date, and that's how you get rid of cookie. We set it to an expiry date in the past, and that effectively deletes it right away. So after we've done that a little bit, I'm going to then say session onset, and that's just onsetting all session variables. Then we're going to call session destroy, which is just going to destroy any data that we've got stored into any session. So you can picture this, what it's doing, and then the process is, you go on some website or go on any website that you've logged into, and you click that log out button. This is the actual process that is going through. That's the process of logging out, and this is effectively what we're doing. Right, let's move it on. Next method is flush method. So I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to say value. I'm going to equal that to session. Come on. Session. I'm going to pass that key in. Right. Then I'm going to call the delete method above what's in this class. And I'm going to say key. Then I'm going to return the value. So we're setting the session, then deleting it, then returning the value. Right? So this method, and this is simple as saying return. So Inset is going to be session key. Just checking that the key is set, the session key is set. And that's as simple as it is. And now we need to go back up into our GetSession method, and we need to sort of like wrap this return session into our add session. So we're checking that we've got the session before we're returning it. So I'm going to cut that out temporarily. I'm going to say this, or if this as session, I'm passing that key because you require that key to check if that session key exists. And then we're going to return just like that. That's as simple as it is. And we've got this second argument within this method, just going to return that down here as well. So the return default. That's it. Now, yeah, semicolon right there. Right. So we need to use this as method within this method as well. So we're checking that we've got a key before we sort of like doing anything else. So I'm going to say if this as session, pass the key in, then we want to wrap this bit of code within this if block. And down at the bottom here, we just want to do the same thing as above. Just want to return the default, which is null, so it won't return anything. But if we do use that second argument, we can return whatever we put in. Right, so we've defined our flush method, defined our asSession method, and define our invalidate or delete session, and our GetSession. And again, we could even wrap this method in that again. So say if this asSession key, just want to unset it because you can't unset something that doesn't exist. Just want to just play it safe. And yep, I think that's pretty much all the method that we've got within our session storage. So the next bit we're going to do, we're going to actually jump back into our abstract class, and we're going to sort of like build that out step by step. I want to go back to my session storage interface, and I want to grab these 4 methods that we've not created yet, and I actually want to work on these first. So I'm going to copy them. I'm going to get back to my abstract session storage. I'm just going to paste them right here, and we're going to build them out. Again, these are going to be dead simple because we're going to be using PHP own method, and we're just wrapping those methods within our own method. So the first one is going to be session name, and that's just a PHP function, and allows us to set our own session name. Yeah, and then there's no return type, it's going to return void. And the get session name is just simple. We're setting it above, then we're just going to return it. Return session name. And a third method is going to be SetSession ID. And again, same as the first one above, it's going to be session ID. I'm going to pass that session ID in. And I know I didn't actually set a data type for this one in our interface in the last video, but after doing some research, I know that this value actually returns a string. So I'm going to define that as a string. Come back into our session storage interface, find that method, and it's going to be a string. So we fix that. Yep. And like I said, it's just going to return session ID. Right? Now that's the simple as it gets when it comes to implementing the method that we've set out in our session storage interface. And that's it. We've actually implemented all the method within this interface. We've done some in the native storage interface, and we've done the simpler ones in the abstract storage interface. And you can see that the get session name, we're using it within our native storage, and that's allowed because we're extending this abstract class above. Where is it? So we're extending this abstract class, so we're able to use whatever method that we've defined in that class. We can then use it in this native session storage class. I hope that's making sense, guys. I hope I'm not going too fast. If I'm going too fast, please just let me know down in the comments. If you're stuck, just put it down in the comments. I will get back to you, and I will explain it to you a little bit more if you're not sort of like getting what I'm saying or getting what I'm doing. So please do that. Use the comment box down below to let us know what you're thinking. If I can do this a little bit different, just please let me know down in the comment box. And yeah, let's close that out. We'll finish with that and close that. Let's just work on this abstract session storage class. So a couple of methods that I actually want to implement. I want to implement a Inset method, and what that method does, it provides us with some configuration option where we can actually override some of PHP default configuration. As I say, public function Inset, right? And what I'm doing right here, I'm sort of like giving our application the option to rewrite some of PHP own configurations. I'm going to use the Inset method to rewrite some of that. So the first one's going to be Inset, and it's going to be session.gc, which is garbage collector max lifetime, and it's going to be this options, and it's set at gc max lifetime. And this option is what we're passing in from our constructor, which is going to be filtered down from the factory, so we can actually pass the entire configuration from our YAML file into our factory as an array, which is going to be assigned to this actual constructor argument, which gives us all the options that we've defined within our configuration YAML file, which is something we're going to be looking at later on. Next one's going to be Inset. It's going to be session.gc, or garbage collector dot divisor, I think it's called. Yep. And again, we're providing the option to override these within our configuration file. And I'm just going to create these, and we'll talk about these when we come to actually implementing them. But I wanted to actually set these out within this abstract class. The session.gc probability options Inset the session dot cookie lifetime. This options the cookie lifetime. Yep. And the last one that I actually want to set is, let's clean this up, is set. I'm still having issues with my keyboard, as you can tell. Session. I've not bought one because I've put that on my Christmas list, so I don't want to go and buy it and then someone else buy me a keyboard. So I'm leaving it for now. I'm persevering for now. Use cookies. Yeah, and I've got a Christmas list. Big kid. And it's gonna be this options. Use cookies. Yeah, and that's pretty much all we're going to be configuring for now. If there's something else that we need to put in, we can then come back and put that in at a later date. But this is all the option that I want to touch for now. Now, the next method that I want to actually create is a method that actually checks if we've got a session ID, and that's going to use let's just write it out and I explain to you what it is. So it's gonna be public function is session started. That's what we're going to be calling it. And what we want to actually do is we want to return, and that's going to be PHP SAPI name. And this basically sort of like checks if we're running in CLI or HTTP or whatnot. And we don't actually want to be running in CLI because you cannot use session in CLI, which is our command line interface. So I'm going to say PHP SAPI isn't CLI, yeah, and we're going to use this GetSession ID method. I want to make sure that's not empty, and if it is, just going to return false. That's as simple as it is for that particular method, right? So, and I'm going to show you how we're going to be hooking these up, because there's a purpose why we're implementing these methods. It's not just putting it in for the sake of putting it in. We're going to be actually using these. The next one is going to be a method that I'm going to call start session, and this is basically going to check our PHP status to see if we've got a session, and just if we've not got one, we're going to just start one. Right, so it's going to be PHP, it's going to be start session. I'm going to say if session status, right, session status equal PHP session none. I'm going to say session start. Again, very, very simple methods. Now, the next method I'm going to create is one that says public function start. And this is the actual method that's going to get executed within our constructor, which actually starts our actual session. These that we've created, we're just going to be checking stuff with them. And I'm going to show you how we're going to be hooking that up. So our session start method, we want to say this. We're going to say set session name, and we're going to give that a name, and that name is going to come through this options property. Again, we're going to be setting an array within our configuration files, which we're going to be sent down through our native session storage and straight into this abstract session storage. So we've got access to all those configuration options that we're going to define, and within that we're going to be able to define our session name. And I'm going to use an underscore to write out my strings, right? Then we're going to define that domain, and this domain is where we've set this cookie params, or the get cookie params, and we've got params path, domain, HTTP only, and secure. We're going to be defining all of these right here, and it's all going to be coming from our configuration file. I'll say if Inset this options, and it's domain, then we want to get that domain, else use PHP super global variable server, and we should run it into a Inset, check that it's actually set server, yep, and it's going to be the server name. Right, so if we've not got a domain set, we're just going to use the PHP super global server and get the server name. I'm going to say secure, then it's going to be Inset, it's going to be this options, and it's going to be secure. If it's set, then we're going to fetch it. Else, again, we're going to use PHP super global server to actually get the HTTPS, or the security of the website, and that's going to be coming through is it again server, go HTTPS, yep. And now we're going to say session set cookie params, because remember we're getting the params within our native session storage class, and in our abstract class, as I said earlier, we're going to actually set those parameters. So the first argument we're going to set is the lifetime. So it's going to be this options lifetime. Second argument is going to be the path. It's going to be this options path. And the third argument is going to be the domain, which we have defined outside of this method, because we're doing all these checks, and it's best to sort of like do it outside and pass in a variable, which is what we've done right here. And same thing for secure. Again, we've just passed a variable in. And the last argument, we're just going to pass us straight into the SetCookie params. And I'm going to say this options, and it's going to be HTTP only, which is what we've called it around here as well, HTTP only. Yeah. So that's pretty much all we've set these cookie parameters, and these are going to be coming from our configuration file, which we are going to define within our application. Now, what's this error that we're getting? Right, yes, sorry about that. That needs to be there, like that. And what we want to do now is say this session, or it's called this start session, right, like that, which is this method that we've called just right here, start our session. Once we've sort of like set up our cookie parameters, we want to start that session, but we're going to take it back up into the constructor, and we're going to do a couple of stuff up there. So we're going to take it back up, and we're going to do to say this that ini set. So with constructor methods, or constructor, whenever time you create an object of that class, the constructor is called automatically. So whatever we've got in that constructor is just going to get invoked, and that's exactly what we want happening with this Inset. We want it to be invoked as soon as we got an as soon as we've created an object of this class, which we won't be doing. We're going to be instantiating our native session storage, and because that's actually implementing or extending this abstract class, this constructor is going to get called, because we're calling the parent construct within this constructor. So whatever we've got in here in this actual method is going to get invoked as well. So we also want to check that we've got a session ID. So we're going to say this is session started. So what this is, if the session is started, we don't want the session to be auto start. So if it's auto started, we want to actually just kill that session and start it ourselves. So I'm going to say session onset and say session destroy. Right? So we sort of like destroying any auto started session, and we're just going to fire off our start method down there. So I'm going to say this start. So we're starting our own session. Right? And that's pretty much all we've hooked up these methods. So we've passed this method between our constructor, which is going to get invoked when we create an object of our native session storage class. That's going to get invoked, and we're starting our session, which is defined in this method down here. So that's pretty much what we're going to be implementing within this session class for the time being. We're going to be revisiting this at a later point to finish off the other implementation, like preventing hijacking of our sessions and regenerating new session IDs and stuff like that. But it's quite a lot of work to do, and I want to sort of like get cracking on to different bits within this actual project. So that's it for now, guys. I want to keep this video nice and short, so but you know, you can head straight over to the next video, which we're going to be implementing the session factory, and that's going to be coming up just after this video. So please go ahead, watch that next one, and don't forget to like, share the videos. And if you're new to the channel, go ahead and subscribe and hit that little notification icon, so you can get alerted when I've dropped videos on the channel, so you can carry on as I hope you are carrying on. So guys, again, like, share, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be posting the next video right away, so there's going to be a link in the description that's going to take you to the next video, so you can watch on and learn how to implement that session factory.